Welcome to the Owens Recovery Science Podcast, where we dive deep into all things blood flow restriction training. I'm your show host, Johnny Owens, and whether you're a clinician, researcher, or athlete, you've come to the right place. Each episode, we break down the latest research, interview leading experts, and translate complex science into practical applications. We're here to bridge the gap between laboratory findings and real-world implementation. What's up, folks, and welcome back to another Owens Recovery Science Podcast. I'm your host today, Johnny Owens, with a great friend, one of my favorite people. He's already been on the podcast before, and very few people get to come back, so he should be proud of that. But before I get into our guest, be sure and like and subscribe if you enjoy our stuff. If you want to learn more about blood flow restriction, go to our website, owensrecoveryscience.com. We have great content there. We've just put out a bunch of new blogs. We got one on why BFR and hydration is probably more important than you think. We have one on creatine, one about the topic we're going into today. And also we have all of our blood flow restriction certified courses all over the place. So go on there if you want to take a deeper dive into BFR. I guess other big news, the Delphi Generation 3 system is basically out now. We kind of did pre-orders with a bunch of the teams and already sold out of the first round, but it is a sweet system. It has been a long time coming. It's bilateral, so basically two systems in one big box with bilateral LOP, bilateral regulation. It has a new microprocessor. It's really fast. You get your LOPs super quick. EMG comes with it, which is a smoker. I don't know if anyone's ever done blood flow restriction while they're trying to do biofeedback and maximize muscle recruitment, but basically I was doing leg extensions. I normally can do it at around, I'm not going to tell you what my weight is, but using that EMG, and we have a metronome on there, I had to drop down to no weight by the third set. It just like smokes your muscles. So I think that's going to be a game changer too. So if you're interested about that, there should be new ones coming in stock. So reach out to info@owensrecoveryscience.com. So this guy's very busy. He is super productive. He's one of the leaders in the world on blood flow restriction. He was trained by one of the best, Dr. Stephen Patterson, our other good buddy. What's also cool is we're both Welsh. My ancestry says I'm 13% Welsh. So I love having this guy on. I'm going to use my Welsh accent. All right, Luke. He's a scientist, a professor, a spaceman, a BFR expert, a footballer, and a frequent pub goer. Dr. Luke Hughes. Was that good, Luke?
Oh my God, what Welsh documentaries do you guys watch?
Wrexham. That's pretty much it.
Okay, you got it from that. Wow. Okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, not too bad. We can work on it, Johnny. Maybe next time I'm
All
over
right. I'll come
in
over and
Texas.
learn my roots. We might be
But
related. You never know.
it was not too bad. You had the twang there for some of the words, so it was quite good.
I'm trying to be Catherine Zeta-Jones, but I just couldn't pull it off.
Just got the looks.
Yeah, so welcome, Luke. So one thing, if you guys haven't been following us and our blogs and everything else, Luke has become the kind of, I would think, one of the experts in blood flow restriction and its potential applications in space. And so if you listen to our podcast in the past with him, we talked about a lot of his work he'd been doing clinically and performance-wise, but and mechanistically. And then he transitioned into doing a lot more work with the European Space Agency, with NASA, Canadian Space Agency, I think, all the space agencies all over the place, it feels like. And now he's doing really badass stuff. The most amazing thing is he got me to present with him at NASA. Even though I didn't know crap about space, we presented in front of the biggest screen I've ever seen in my life, like an IMAX for slides. So anyways, Luke, welcome to the pod, man.
Thanks, Johnny. It's great to be back as always. And yeah, that was a big screen. I was quite taken aback by what we had to present on that slide. But
I was like,
it was good fun.
please don't let my words be spelled wrong because it's going to really stand out. when the when the
Yeah,
font's like 900 point or whatever. But yeah,
there's
man, it
no
was a
escaping.
blast.
And the world's
Yes,
biggest pointer as well.
you've kind of been all over Europe with your studies, but fill us in. Where are you? Where are you now? Are you back home?
Yeah, so home in Newcastle, in the northeast of England, where we currently have a storm outside. So if you can hear that in the background, apologies. But yeah, back home. Spent a bit of time in Slovenia recently for one of our bed rest studies with the European Space Agency, which isn't BFR related, but hopefully will be in a couple of years' time. So that was always a really cool thing to do. Subjects 60 days in bed at 6 degree head down tilt, deconditioning, so we can measure how badly they decondition.
So
So yeah,
they stay in bed for 60 days.
yeah. So ESA and NASA and other agencies do it, but I guess ESA do it more frequently. So they use a ground-based analog, is what it's called. So astronauts, we know there's very few of them. They're really hard to access, and paying for an astronaut's time before, during, or after spaceflight is very expensive. So, a really good way that we can study what happens to their bodies in space is using ground-based analogs. So, bed rest is one way that we can get people to decondition it in a similar way to what astronauts experience when they're unloaded in microgravity. So, we can study what happens on the ground to understand how much do they decondition, which tissues decondition, the muscle, the bone, cardiovascular system. But then more importantly, or equally importantly, we can look at, okay, how can we counteract this? How can we mitigate this deconditioning in the bone? So let's try this type of exercise and see what impact that has on all these physiological systems. So ESA and other agencies have been doing bed rest studies for over 20 years now. They've become more complex as the years have gone on. The particular study we were working on was looking at artificial gravity in a centrifuge with exercise and whole body vibration to see if that can mitigate decondition. And our particular project was looking at the lumbopelvic decondition, so the spine and how that links with low back pain, etc. So we had a control group who, after 60 days in bed, don't look so good, which is tough, which is tough. But
You're
it's
sarcopenia and these poor people, man. They're never going to get their muscle back.
yeah, no, they like when I left this study after we collected our data and after seeing the control group after 2 months in bed, I thought if there's ever a day where I should be going to the gym and I don't feel like it, I'm going to remember watching them walk down the corridor the first day they got out of bed, and I'm going to
I
get my
bet.
ass to the gym because yeah, it's amazing how quickly the body deconditions and how the magnitude of that and how debilitated these individuals are when they've not had an intervention. But equally, it's really interesting to see the subjects who have had an intervention, whether it be exercise with a vibration plate or the same but with the addition of artificial gravity. These guys are in pretty good condition. They're still deconditioned to an extent, but perfectly manageable based on what we've seen so far. So with rehabilitation, we can get them back to pre-bed rest levels of overall fitness, potentially. So yeah, it's a really cool study to do. That study was we started in 2020. That was when our proposal was accepted, and we just finished data collection 2025. So
Crazy. Does
it's
anyone
a
like
long one.
wig out being stuck there that long?
It's rare that there's dropouts, just because the subjects are vetted so much. So like recruitment starts like 8, 9 months before, and I think there was something like 600 people applied for this particular study, and we had 24 subjects. So
I'm sure
not
they
many
get paid
people.
a little bit to be a subject.
Oh yeah,
You
they
have
get
to.
paid
Yeah.
a good amount. I mean,
Yeah.
not enough for me
Yeah.
personally, but after seeing what happens. But
Were they
yeah,
like
you get,
wear diapers? How are y'all bedpans?
so they're in like they'll have baseline data collection, which is usually a 2 week period. So we're testing everything from muscle strength, bone mineral density, orthostatic tolerance, like you name it, it's included in the standard measures. And then they go to bed and they spend 60 days in a bed, but they're also at 6 degree head down tilt.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's so we can, when astronauts go to space and there's no gravity acting on the head to the toe, fluids, so blood, other fluids shift from the feet towards the head. And that's why astronauts get chicken legs, skinny legs, and puffy face.
Big old
And there's
faces.
actually, yeah, a big puffy face. And there's actually recent data coming out that suggests that this shift of fluid towards the head might be a primary cause or causative factor of spaceflight associated neuroocular syndrome, which is when
Mm,
astronauts' eyesight goes bad in space. We also see increased intracranial pressure as well, potentially increased risk of DVT, which might be linked to these fluid shifts. So, actually, that's in terms of what we're trying to mitigate. In terms of what happens physiologically in space, the fluid shift from the feet towards the head is actually really, really important. Target, I guess, mitigation target. But so they have them at 6 degree head down tilt on the bed because then the fluid shifts towards the head and um, it closely resembles what astronauts experience in space. So not only are we unloading the muscles and the bones, we're actually creating that fluid shift as well. So they, the first 4 or 5 days, they just complaining headaches, headaches,
yeah.
headaches because of
Yeah.
that. And like I've tried it, even 10 minutes after being at that position, you start to get a headache. So um, yeah, it's a lot. But then they have them there for 60 days. So they're in the bed and they got the toilet in the bed. They roll over on their side, bedpan. And that's how they got the toilet. They eat in the bed. Any questionnaires they do in the bed, and then they can have a shower. They get moved over to basically a water bed, still at 6 degree head down tilt, and then just shower themselves down with a garden hose,
Good
basically. So
Lord.
a lot of them say that because they're 6 degree head down tilt, the water pools at the bottom of the bed, so they've got to be quick, otherwise their head's underwater.
I feel like they're
Um,
drowning.
yeah, yeah, but no, it's a really cool study to see organized. There was 12 different science teams on our particular study, and then the wider team from ESA who were running the study. And like there's 24/7 medical support from nurses. There's just so much going on. The food's prepared down to every macro, every calorie is accounted for because we want to be sure that energy balance is very exact. So we see deconditioning as a result of unloading, not as a result of a significant calorie deficit, for example. So there's so much. It really opened up my eyes to like the level of complexity you can get in science compared to just a general lab-based physiology study.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
so yeah, it was a cool experience.
Yeah. I mean, I remember like Luke Van Loon's just 1 week bed rest study and the amount of muscle that you lose. I just can't imagine
Yeah,
how much these people lost
yeah,
muscle and
oh
bone.
yeah, so much, and it's also like the pain they get as well. So like, they all get low back pain, which is good for us as a science team because that's what we're researching.
What you're looking at.
But what really surprised me with this being my first bed rest study was that all the subjects complained of soreness on the soles of their feet because when they stand up on day one, nothing's touched the sole of their
Yeah.
feet, so they're
Yeah.
so sensitive.
Yeah.
Just the touch of like material, a sock, anything, just feels like so much for them. So yeah, those little things, and we were looking at spinal curvature and how the pelvis tilt might change when they're walking. So a challenge that we didn't anticipate was that we knew they would be walking badly, but we didn't know that sore feet was going to be
Yeah.
a
Their
part
pain
of
and
that as well.
their
Yeah,
feet
so it
were
was
the
like.
limiting factor.
Yeah, so we were trying to figure out, ways to get around that. So yeah, but they're really cool studies, and I think hopefully we can start doing some bed rest studies with blood flow restriction
Yeah.
interventions
Yeah.
to
I know
really get a
there's
good
been
idea.
some already done, even with NASA. So
Yeah, some limited. What's been done is quite limited, and I think you guys will know if you read the stuff yourself. BFR hasn't been applied in what we currently believe to be the most optimal
right
way
way.
based on data
Yeah.
we have. So I think there's lots to go back and unpick from what's been done, and there's so many gaps. So hopefully we can start doing that um, soon, and we are progressing towards that. Which I can't talk too much about that, but we are. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
things are
Yeah.
moving. Wheels are in
I
motion,
know.
so that's
I
good.
know.
Yeah,
Well, let's
yeah.
go to space. So I think everyone who listens to this is already going to know why BFR seems like it's just a no-brainer when you're in microgravity or I never know micro macro gravity, whatever it is. Um, but I think like what your thoughts are on the applications, maybe not just for muscle, but also talking about bone and maybe even that fluid shift and cardiovascular and kind of what maybe the long-term vision is all the way from going just traveling in a rocket, which you've already done, to space station, maybe to long-term, if we can have interplanetary kind of life.
Yeah, it's a great question. maybe we take a step back and just think about what actually happens to astronauts and what they currently do in space. So we know that as soon as they're exposed to microgravity, so when they even before they get to the space station, when they're out, in orbit, out of Earth's gravitational pull, we see those fluid shifts pretty much immediately. So that's the first thing that happens. So they get that headache, that puffy face, the skinny legs. We see changes to central hemodynamics because suddenly there's more venous return because blood's
Hmm.
flowing back up there. It's not having to fight against gravity. So see those changes. And then when they get to the space station and they spend 6 months, we see muscular system decondition. So they lose muscle mass, they lose strength, they lose bone mineral. We see cardiovascular deconditioning because your peripheral vasculature hasn't got to work to push blood back up towards
Hmm.
your heart because it does it by itself. So we see deconditioning there. We
And this
changes
is
in
even
sensory
with
motor.
them trying to mitigate it. I remember reading a NASA paper years ago, like they were doing 6 days a week of what they're currently doing, and they still couldn't mitigate these changes. Right?
No, exactly, yes, and that's like the point I'm getting at there is that we know as deconditioning occurs. We've known for 20 odd years longer if we go back to the shuttle, etc. And then we have a quite a extensive countermeasure program, ways to mitigate that. And diet is part of that. Nutrition, for example. Potentially in the future, we're going to see, pharmacological interventions. The importance of those probably going to rise as well. But at the moment, for the International Space Station, the primary exercise or the primary countermeasure is exercise. It's the cornerstone of the countermeasure program. It's the most important and effective thing we have. How astronauts perform exercise in space has changed a lot over the last 20 years. There's some really great papers from ESA's space medicine team that can give a good overview of that for anyone who's interested. To give you the summary, we know that over time, we've learned more about which type of exercise intensities, modalities work better than others, and we've also developed better exercise equipment. So currently on the space station, astronauts perform exercise, as you said, Johnny, 6 days per week, and they get allocated 2.5 hours per day to perform exercise. So that includes setting up the equipment, doing the exercise, breaking it down, and personal hygiene, which in space is a baby wipe. But they're performing high intensity resistance and high intensity aerobic exercise on 6 days per week. Some of them do it 7 days a week. They get the day off, but they choose to do it because they know how important it is for their bodies. So they're doing that.
Treadmill,
So there's quite
right?
yeah. So they have ARED, which is the Advanced Resistive Exercise Device. So it's basically like a multi-exercise bit of gym kit that allows you to do bench press, squat, deadlift, etc. You can do an isometric mid thigh pull on there. So typically, kind of bilateral based resistance movements can be done on there, symmetrical based movements. And then they also have two aerobic modalities. So they have CVIS, so the cycle ergometer with vibration isolation system. And we'll come back to that in a moment, but it's basically
Hmm.
a bike, an ergometer. And then they have the T2 treadmill as well. So as you probably already tell, those bits of equipment are big, they're bulky, they're heavy, which in space comes with problems. So not only is the weight of things potentially when you're trying to pack things in, the size an issue,
Wait, are
we
you
have to
saying
have
they're limited for space?
yeah yeah inside.
I got
Nice,
it out
Johnny.
there,
How
limited for. Thank you.
when
But
when did you
boo!
when did you plan that? How many weeks ago? That's
I've
why
been
you invited me
waiting. I've
back, just so
been
you could drop
waiting,
that.
man. I've been waiting. Yeah, yeah. Okay, keep going, man. Sorry.
Uh, no, it's great. So yeah, but so they have this equipment, and it's big, it's bulky, it takes up lots of room. They spend a lot of time exercising at higher intensities, and because they're performing exercise at higher intensities, we also need vibration isolation systems to go underneath the exercise equipment to reduce transmission of vibration to the spacecraft, because it could potentially knock it off course, but also vehicle longevity. If you've constantly got someone banging on a
Yeah.
treadmill against the side of the space station, it's a magnificent structure, but it still has wear and tear, and you can see images of the ISS now compared to 10 years ago. You can see the wear and tear. The astronauts tell you about it when they go repeat missions. So, and we know that the current, as we've developed the program over the years, I say we, I haven't been directly involved in that, but as the space agencies have developed that, we know that we've got a lot better at mitigating deconditioning, but we still can't fully mitigate it. So we can attenuate it, but we can't completely stop deconditioning. So
Hmm.
it's still a problem. And then that problem is, I guess, exacerbated by the fact that we're now trying to go beyond low Earth orbit. So we're going to have Lunar Gateway, which is the new space station that will orbit the moon. It'll link to a lunar descent vehicle, which will go to a lunar habitat. So we're going to have astronauts living further away from the Earth than ever before, working on a small space station that does not have room for the ARED, the
The
treadmill, the
equipment.
bike.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
doesn't have room for that. So the actual capability to do high intensity type exercise is significantly constrained. Might not be possible in some respects as well, but it's going to be the same for a lunar habitat, right? Apologies for my coughing, but there's going to be less room available in a lunar habitat as well. So while we're not coming back to square one because we've learned so much, in some ways we are going back to square one because these devices that we have, we can't take any of them to, they won't fit in. So we currently have the Orion spacecraft, which is the spacecraft that's taking astronauts back to the moon. That can only fit a flywheel type exercise device in it currently. So this is public knowledge. That's the only bit of kit that's currently available for Artemis missions, which is the goal of is to take humans back to the moon. So we no longer have these big bits of equipment to enable high intensity resistance and aerobic type exercise. Another big concern, which people I think often forget, is that when we're in space, it's a very controlled environment. So when you perform exercise, you produce sweat, you produce CO2. This all has to be scrubbed from the
Yeah.
spacecraft. So
Yeah.
we have the what's called the ECLIS system, the environmental life support systems, which work really hard. And actually, there's a lot of research into what the typical metabolic rate of a type of exercise is, and therefore can the support systems handle that type of exercise. And actually, okay, we can only have two astronauts exercising at any one time because we know it takes X amount of time for the average amount of CO2 and sweat produced by those individuals to be scrubbed.
Yeah.
So yeah, so these systems in the new spacecraft, the new generation of spacecraft, the new space station are going to be smaller. So again, exercise, it's not just the physical stress of vibration transmission, but it's also the stress of scrubbing these byproducts out of the system. So it might be that in the Orion spacecraft that can fit four astronauts in, they have a 3-4 day journey to the moon. They can only exercise one at a time. It might be a couple of hours between each exercise session, and the other three astronauts pretty much can't do anything while one of them is exercising until there's not enough space. So these are all problems that we now have that are they're really significant problems because we're going to have the technology to get people to Mars and the spacecraft infrastructure before we're able to keep them fit enough to perform a mission successfully.
Crazy.
So
Isn't that crazy, right?
yeah, so it's hugely important because when we
Yeah.
send someone to Mars, and they get there, 12 month journey, get there, step out the spacecraft, fracture the tibia.
Yeah.
Great, that's them done. They can't be
Yeah.
doing much else. So yeah, it's really important, which is great. So yeah, so we're now moving away to like a new generation of exercise countermeasures. So there's a couple of different devices that are, I guess, leading candidates, which typically are smaller, more compact, but still enable higher intensities of exercise. And I say higher intensities because we don't know if it's going to be as high um, as they currently do on the ISS. So will it be high enough? We don't know. So I guess we know that international space agencies are looking for ways that we can either make exercise countermeasures more efficient, so reduce the time required for exercise without reducing the efficacy, that can enable lower intensities of exercise to be more effective, that require, less volume and less mass to be uploaded. The payloads are smaller. So as you
Are
already
you
know,
there?
Johnny and Cal, that ticks BFR ticks all those boxes.
That sucks. He was on a roll. When he said they have a storm, I don't know if that's messing with anything. Okay, so we were on two current devices they're looking at.
Hey, you guys there?
Can you hear us, Luke?
Can you hear me?
Hey, buddy.
Are we back?
We're back, man. You're on it. You're on a roll too, so let's not lose that. So you were discussing the two. There's currently two devices that they're looking at using. Um, so that's right when we lost you.
Yeah,
So we'll
cool.
just
Yeah,
have.
we can pick that up for sure. So yeah, there's a couple of new devices that essentially are designed to be smaller, more compact, but still allow higher intensities of exercise. Whether that's going to be sufficient or not, we don't know yet. So we don't know, apart from the Orion flywheel, which we know will be in the Orion spacecraft that will take astronauts back to the moon. in terms of what will be on the lunar space station in lunar habitats, what will be on the SpaceX Starship. We don't know yet. That's kind of a key focus of the international spaceflight community is what exercise hardware are we going to use. And I think regardless of whether it's device one, device two, device three, whether it's a flywheel, whether it's an ergometer or a small, resistance-based device, I think BFR should be included as an adjunct, as something that's complementary to all those devices. So it can make, if we're on the E4D device, we know we can use BFR in combination with resistance-based exercise and make it more effective. If it's a cycle ergometer, we know we can get lots of additional benefits from combining BFR with aerobic type exercise. If it's with the flywheel exercise, that we know that device, the Orion flywheel, led by NASA, the primary and only aerobic modality that enables is rowing. And we know from, okay, limited, but we got 4 or 5 papers in the BFR world that demonstrate performing BFR during rowing can increase aerobic capacity, strength, etc. So I think regardless of what the exercise modality is and what the hardware is that enables that,
Yeah,
BFR has a place, and I think that it's we have all of the different candidates for modalities and hardware in space at the moment. We have ground-based evidence that shows BFR makes those more effective when they're performed at low to moderate intensities. So I
exactly.
think that it's a really good tool to augment something that's very limited by itself.
And you've tested the rowing flywheel with BFR already, in microgravity, I guess, on the vomit rocket or whatever you want to call it.
It's the vomit rockets. Yeah, it's a common name for it. But yeah, we did. So July 2024, we had the opportunity to participate in a parabolic flight with the Canadian Space Agency. Um, I've been working with them for probably maybe, I don't know, 10, 11 months before that. They were interested in BFR and we're working to develop it as a tool for the CSA. All I can say at this stage, but I can't talk about the parabolic flight because we've published the paper now. So um, that flight, the CSA were looking at flywheel type exercise, and for they had their own goals and objectives for that, but they also had scope to test a medical device that was of interest to them, and that could be anything from non-invasively measuring blood pressure, blood flow, fluid shifts, etc. But they wanted to include BFR, so we got the opportunity to do the first ever vomit comet BFR experiment. No one vomited, thankfully, but I'm not sure if the PTS is immune to vomit as a
Yeah,
fluid. But
I've had to
yeah,
clean
so
up some
we
weird stuff on them before, but
yeah, no, same. We should talk about that another
yeah.
time. Compare notes, but
Were
but
you
yeah, we
were
did
you
that.
on that flight? I saw the video.
No,
Mm.
I wasn't on that flight, so it was two of the exercise specialists from the Canadian Space Agency who are the best people because they're the ones who prescribe the exercise for their Canadian astronauts. But we got some nice data. It was fairly limited as an experiment in terms of what we could do, just because it was short notice and it was proof of concept. Very much, this is the first time we're doing it because at this stage we didn't know if BFR was possible in microgravity. We didn't know if the PTS, the Delphi Personalized Tourniquet System, worked at all. Could it perform automatic limb occlusion pressure measurement? Could it auto-regulate pressure as well as it does on Earth? Can individuals actually perform exercise with BFR in space, or is it too much discomfort? So there was lots of, I guess, basics not the right word, but there was lots of obvious starting points and questions that we had to address. And unfortunately, the answer to all of those questions was yes. The PTS device could measure LP, it could auto-regulate. Both of the individuals could do exercise, and we collected some basic physiological data, but it gave us an early indication that BFR was amplifying the physiological stress of exercise on the flywheel.
You could tell in the
Um,
video.
yeah, yeah,
Yannick
there
looked
was.
smoked at the end. Yeah.
He was smoked. There was some swear words we edited out, but yeah, but yeah, so it was really good, and we're looking to do more experiments in parabolic flight. Exploring BFR and rowing, for example, as one avenue, which I know we discussed and presented a little bit at CHOP, Johnny, NASA. So yeah, so we did that, and then that was awesome, and it was like first ever time in parabolic flight, so it was a big check for BFR in space, and we also did bilateral, so it was a Gen 2 unit Delphi very generously supported the study and modified the device so we could do bilateral. Just because I think
Don't
whenever,
say that. Now everyone's going to be trying to modify their Gen 2.
yeah, no, you need the. It was a one-time case.
Get the
It was
engineers involved. Yeah.
yeah, urgent science. But yeah, so we did that, and then we around the same time, a couple of months later, I'd applied to SpaceX. So SpaceX had a call for last year. They had a call for research proposals for the first time ever for in-orbit research on SpaceX Dragon, and their goal was to look at exercise-related or health-related countermeasures and I guess monitoring tools that might be useful for them because they're a private organization, so their view on physiological health and exercise in space could be very different to ESA, NASA, the CSA, and it is in some respects. And that information is out there to be seen. But they were interested in, okay, what could we, what's a minimally viable type of exercise we can do? If we have a situation where there's equipment failure, is there a basic form of exercise we can do just to keep people ticking over while things are repaired, etc. So we, I'd submitted a BFR proposal, and yeah, it was selected. So in March this year, 2025, well, first before that, we should say we were working on a project which was funded by the UK Space Agency, where we took the Delphi PTS and we developed the PTSS, so the Personalized Tourniquet System for Spaceflight. Easy acronym, rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Yeah, sounds like the cuff deflating.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, we so with spaceflight, when we send up, devices, whether it be exercise countermeasure hardware, whether it be a blood pressure cuff, something, it has to be qualified for space because the ISS, as we said, it's a very controlled environment. Anything with a potential to blow up or to damage the space station in any way has to undergo rigorous testing. Well, everything does. We knew that there was some aspects of the PTSS that wouldn't be compatible with the ISS, and that's pretty much the case for all commercial off-the-shelf devices. Yes, the first step really, we did a parabolic flight with a commercial device because that was fine, but I knew that if the longer-term goal was to get BFR in space from, to actually implement it, but also to do the research to support that, we needed a device that could be used. So the first step really was to apply to get funding. So from the UK Space Agency and the Humans in Space Challenge, which was a global competition, we won. And that combination of funding allowed us to do a 12-month project where we worked with Delphi and also Kaiser Space, who specialize in developing new hardware for space, but also adapting COTS devices for space. So then we worked together and we analyzed the PTSS and said, okay, here's how it works. I said, okay, this is what we needed to do in space. And then Kaiser could ask questions and go, tell us about this component, or when it inflates, how much air does it suck in? Well, all those kinds of questions. And then we modified it. So we said, okay, these are the things we need to change. We did that in January in Vancouver. And then SpaceX took it and put it through qualification. So they do lots of tests, thermal chamber, can it withstand certain temperatures, vibration tests, and they put it on a big vibration plate and throw it around and see, okay, can it survive the stress of launch and the G forces? So they have all this elaborate testing, and then then we were selected to fly with SpaceX, and thankfully they qualified the device. So yeah, it flew, and for the first time in history, we had
Wow.
people doing BFR exercise in space in SpaceX Dragon, and it was also, I didn't realize until like the day before it flew, the day before the launch, but it was also the first time that exercise has ever been done in SpaceX Dragon as well. So not
Oh,
only was
wow.
it the first BFR exercise experiment, it was the first exercise
And I was two
experiment.
hours away from the launch. I was at the NFL meetings. It was right there. So I
Ah,
couldn't see it, but yeah, I was so
did you
close.
hear anything? Could you
I didn't
hear
hear
anything
anything. I
from
was just
that?
worried, like, please don't blow up. Please don't blow up. Please don't blow up.
Yeah, well, it was 3 a.m. for me when it launched, 2 a.m. So yeah, I tried to go to bed at 10 p.m. I thought I'll sleep for a couple of hours and I'll get up. That didn't work. So I was sat down drinking double espressos at 1:30 in the morning. Accepted my fate and yeah, just watched the build up. And SpaceX actually did a piece where they they chose two experiments to showcase on like the pre-launch webcast, and they chose the BFR stuff, which was really cool. So yeah, then it flew. The launch happened. Most importantly, the astronauts were safe, but also the PTSS was safe. And on the second day, they got out and they put it to work. So
Can you go over the exercises they did?
yeah, so the exercise device was chosen by SpaceX, and essentially it was like a an adapted climbing harness, which was adapted into to enable squats. So it was like a 3-point climbing harness around the waist, which connected to foot plates on the feet with bungee cords to provide some resistance. So it was more like a it was more like a horizontal supine leg press where you're pushing away from yourself, rather than a squat. But it enabled us to do some form of exercise, get some muscle contractions and with resistance. So it was a good first step for demonstrating BFR could be done. So they did a standard BFR protocol, 75 reps, 30 and 315s, slightly longer
Did you have
rest
to think
periods because
about changing LOPs at all for space?
yeah, we went with a lower LLP, and I can talk about this because it's out there in the public domain, and it'll it's in the paper which we'll publish soon. Yeah, we went with a lower LLP, so we went with 50% LLP. It's still within that the target window we recommend of 40 to 80. We're at the lower end for multiple reasons, but I think a key one was that we really wanted to assess the tolerability and the
Tolerance.
feasibility of doing it. And I think, if we did the 80% LLP can, it can be uncomfortable for lots of people. And I think, this is why I know I do. We typically start with a lower pressure and we build up to that over a period of time, just like with load, with exercise, right? Repeated bout, you build up to it. So that was part of the reason, but also we wanted to make sure that, that people could do it and it was tolerable, and they thought, yeah, actually we could be interested in doing this again, because I think if the first time we ever did it in space, people were like, whoa, that was horrible, we didn't
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. And
It's
we've
done
we've
done in one.
yeah, we haven't just set ourselves back, it's dead in the water. Not necessarily, but like, it's so yeah, we went with that, and we were also interested in the safety, and we were doing some vascular ultrasound measures to look at blood flow in the popliteal vein, internal jugular vein, from like a safety point of view. So they had lots going on in the rest periods as well. So we extended the rest periods up to 60 seconds. So they had more time to take some outcomes. So yeah, and then
With the
we had a
cuff
survey
inflated.
as well. Yeah, the cuff inflated and deflated. Yeah. So
That's gotta suck.
yeah. Yeah, so we allowed for deflation as well. So that was something we introduced, like intermittent BFR with a lower pressure, just to kind of, we were just interested in kind of repeating what we did in the parabolic flight, but in actual outer space. Say, okay, data suggests it works. The device performs normally. BFR looks as it should. It feels as it should. It was like the important step was, going an extra 350,000 kilometers north and then doing it again in a very hostile environment. So yeah, we adapted it a bit to suit the constraints or fit the constraints, but it was still a protocol that we know, when you apply that consistently on the ground, we see adaptations in all the tissues we expect to see. Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
you
So
talk about any findings that you have yet?
yeah, so I can. So I can talk about some of the data that we presented at the NASA conference. So um, to talk about the usability survey, so we had a survey that was designed to ask astronauts' perception on operating the PTSS, performing the LLP measurements. Could it perform the measurement? What was the LP values? How did that compare to values taken pre-flight on the ground? And also, how did you find the exercise? So there was questions specific to the discomfort generated during BFR when it was inflated. We had questions specific to how did it feel to have the cuffs on deflated? How long did it take to set up the device, break it down? But then also questions related to symptoms. So, okay, did you feel any symptoms when performing exercise? Did BFR make those worse, etc.? And we had to be quite specific about what we asked, because astronauts always experience symptoms in space. They feel nauseous, they have headaches, etc. They can get pain. They get pain in the lower back certainly, but they can get pain in the legs. So yeah, but I mean, to give you there was about 40 different questions within there, but to give you the high level summary is that all the crew members who performed it, which was three of the four, all were able to measure LOP automatically, which is fantastic. The device was able to auto regulate as expected, which we know is important for the safety and effectiveness of the BFR stimulus, and also for knowing that what we're applying is actually what we're applying. Um, and they all found it tolerable and comfortable to perform, and enjoyed it. So that's good. And I think also we had some questions around. Um, like indirectly assessing the feasibility or the physiological stress, how difficult did it feel? And, you could see it was doing what we know BFR
Yeah.
does and what we
Yeah.
expect it to do. It was making very light squats tough.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's what we've got so far. I think
Well,
that's pretty much all I can talk about right
we
now.
know some
But
of the early, you know, kind of inadvertently, some of I think it was like a Russian paper in
mm,
space where the rings that were on their legs when they were exercising might have been doing
yeah,
BFR, but that stroke volume change just by having compression might help with the central kind of fluid shift as well, which, if you can ease off a headache from central changes even for a little while, that's probably like a blessing to those folks.
yeah, definitely. And those that was back in the Mir missions, and the Russians were using. They still have them. The
Yeah.
bracelet cuffs they called them,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah. I
basically
saw some pictures.
Venus restricted thigh cuffs. I know NASA still have them and use them, and they, the purpose of them was just to restrict venous flow. So not use it as a training tool to augment the exercise stimulus, but using it as a way to mitigate fluid shifts.
Yeah.
And there's mixed evidence, but there is some promising data regarding the impact it might have on mitigating fluid shifts. But I think now what we need to do going forward is, in some of the ground-based studies and in-flight studies, okay, how does that influence shift of fluid to the brain, intracranial pressure, and how does that link with spaceflight associated neuroocular syndrome? So yeah, it's certainly, BFR in space technically, as I point out to individuals when I'm talking to flight surgeons and different people about it, is, it has been done to an extent. Okay, a very, very low pressures just to occlude the veins, but the actual concept of restricting blood flow in a limb has been done safely previously. What
Yeah.
we're proposing now is, it is different, of course, but it's, the same underlying concept is there. So yeah, there's definitely scope for that. And I think we know astronauts are so busy on the space station, like they're so busy. So, if they're doing an experiment with their hands or they're fixing a generator, they could have those thigh cuffs on, right? They barely use their legs in space. They might propel themselves off one side of the capsule to the other, but it's, predominantly upper body, which is why we see, most of the muscle mass loss and strength loss is in the weight bearing muscles, the postural muscles. So perhaps they could have those, cuffs on while they're doing something else to mitigate those fluid shifts a few times a day, and maybe that can help with not only fluid shifts but maybe mitigating the peripheral deconditioning by, keeping or sequestering blood in the limbs
Right.
as well. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think we both did, but talked about the endurance piece or doing aerobic exercise with blood flow restriction. And so, when you reduce stroke volume or venous return, you do cardiac output changes. So you get the heart works a little bit harder, but then the real chronic, beautiful adaptations are if you do it for weeks, that every time you release the cuffs, you get that rush of fluid back to the heart. You increase preload, and then the heart actually starts to work at contracting harder, so you can actually kind of help with aerobic changes. Can you hit on, because you were kind of going there, that you think the aerobic exercise with blood flow restriction is kind of like a 1-2 punch for these astronauts, and maybe and just clinically or for athletes as well?
yeah, no, definitely. And I think, as you know, I spoke about this when we spoke together at NASA earlier this year. I think, like, we know that we need exercise countermeasures that are more efficient. But actually, importantly, and it's, NASA explicitly stated, ESA explicitly stated they want countermeasures that can impact multiple physiological systems with one form of exercise. And we typically, aerobic based exercise by itself, without any supplementary strength training, doesn't really have a beneficial effect on the muscle in terms of hypertrophy and strength. Okay, you might get some hypertrophy over time, but it's nothing compared to what you would get with resistance based training. Whereas we know, I think we have, we can be fairly confident now based on the evidence we've got that when you perform BFR during the low intensity aerobic exercise, not only are you getting these incredible improvements in aerobic capacity, which we'll come to in a moment, but also there's benefits in the muscle. So, you know, one idea I have is that, okay, perhaps we don't need to do resistance based stuff or not as much resistance based stuff. So perhaps we can only Perhaps we only need low intensity resistance exercise with BFR if we can also do BFR during aerobic exercise. But I think for wider context, before we dig into that some more, these lunar missions are going to be shorter, right? They're going to be a lot shorter than what astronauts have done on the ISS. So we're not really sure what that means for deconditioning. They're going to have periods of time in microgravity and then hypergravity. So they're going to be at 16% body weight on the moon. We don't know what that means for deconditioning.
Hmm.
But what we do know is that they're still going to decondition. And if we can impact multiple physiological systems with a very time efficient form of exercise,
Yeah.
that's fantastic. And I am a firm believer that combining BFR with aerobic exercise could be one of our best options for that because of the proven impact it has on the muscle and the cardiovascular systems and also potentially bone. Okay, it's very, very limited evidence, but there's some acute work there, some Michael Benben's stuff
Hmm.
that showed changes in some biomarkers of bone turnover when you perform walking exercise with BFR, and that we know that literature is limited because they haven't necessarily assessed it in the optimal way with the key biomarkers and control for things that can influence it. But it is promising that okay, maybe we also hit bone as well. So perhaps for these shorter duration missions where we're not worried about them being in space for 3 years. Perhaps if they're up for 4 or 5 weeks, we can get away with just doing aerobic exercise with BFR, and that might be enough to keep them conditioned enough to perform the mission, come back safely, and undergo rehabilitation.
Yeah, and with less time. I mean, if they're up there a short amount of time, they probably have time's very limited. So if you can get everything done in one fell swoop, that's
Yeah, and I always point to the Abbey paper, which you guys will know very well. But that study, I forget, was it 2010, I think, but where they did a low intensity cycling group, 45 minutes versus 15 minutes at the same intensity, but with BFR and improvements in road capacity, time to exhaustion, if I remember correctly, but also muscle size and muscle strength. And I think that's just I think it's a brilliant paper because it demonstrates impact on multiple physiological systems. It demonstrates that there was no impact on those systems when you did low intensity aerobic exercise without BFR, which you'd expect, so you can be confident. But then it's that time, it's that volume, it's
yeah,
that
in
the
a third
prescribed
of the a
volume.
third of the time. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
just
was
hop on the bike for 15
yeah,
minutes in
Symphony
space per
Intrepid. I mean,
day.
that was my thing because barely got any
Yeah.
time for lunch, so I'd do my lunch 15 minutes on the bike, just trying to replicate that study. I hated
Nice.
it.
Yeah.
It sucked, but yeah, I mean that was my go-to.
Yeah, I think with that stuff as well. I know we've had this conversation before, Johnny, but like I feel like there's so much more we need to learn about the aerobic based BFR literature because arguably you can say that we do have high frequency studies because we have studies that have done once, twice daily walk
Twice a
training
day.
with
Yeah,
BFR, but not we don't have any mechanistic work to support that. It's not like the Nielsen papers where we have
I know
biopsies to look at.
biopsies and yeah.
Yeah, and capillarization of the muscle fibers, myonuclei content. We might see those exact changes with aerobic exercise with BFR high frequency that we
We don't
don't
have
know
anything
yet.
looking at different pressures, you know.
Yeah. And
So
these are key questions to dig in the
yeah,
mechanisms. Okay, is it a combination of central and peripheral adaptations? Arguably, yes, that would make sense. But it's okay.
hmm
What's happening peripherally for us to see improvements in fatigue resistance, time to exhaustion? Is it capillarization of these fibers? Is that the underlying driver? Improved oxygen
exactly.
delivery potentially.
I think it's peripheral and
So
central. Yeah, it's good.
yeah,
There's got to be both components, but and that's that
yeah,
whole translation piece of what you guys are hopefully going to churn out with these crazy awesome scientists, including yourself. I mean, the elderly, sarcopenic, hospital-based patients. It could probably be so much easier to have them do some easy aerobic exercise with this. And if we're getting the
yeah,
muscle
definitely.
and the cardiovascular changes, and that's huge.
Yeah, I think as soon as whatever the patient is, whether it's post ACL repair, or whether it's post hamstring repair, hip replacement, or just coming out of the ICU, I think when you have someone who's ambulatory, get them on a treadmill with the cuffs on. Walking, just get them walking, get them on the Alta G, just anything. I think the sooner we know we always preach the sooner you start, the better in general with exercise, but also with BFR. But I think those types of applications are, yeah, for me currently, it's the most interesting application of BFR in terms of modalities is the aerobic stuff. 'Cause I feel like there's so much potential that we haven't really began to
Well, I
understand
always
yet.
said if you want to have a positive outcome on a BFR study, just do an aerobic study. It seems like there's always something that good that happens.
I can't say that in front of my students, or they'll all want to do aerobic
They
stuff,
all
which would
want to
be
do
good. But
aerobic
we need
now.
some
Yeah, yeah,
chasing that p-value, which we try and train them not to do.
yeah. I know. So long term, and anything else on space? It sounds like you're going to be wrapped up for years to come with this
Yeah,
stuff.
it's
So you have more missions planned, maybe, or you can just say there's more coming.
yeah. There's more coming. There's more coming that I can't talk about just yet. But we have some stuff and ISS based stuff, and then some stuff beyond, which will come. So yeah, there's stuff coming, which is good, and we're in some of those projects. We're in the conceptualization phase. Some of them we're in the preparing to implement phase, and we're also, ramping up the ground based work as well. So we have, for one example, and I will plug this shamelessly, but we have our variable gravity suspension system, which we built at Northumbria, which is a horizontal suspension system that simulates micro and hypogravity, which I know you had mentioned earlier, Johnny. And hypogravity is like reduced gravity, so not zero G, but it's like gravity on the moon and Mars. So on the moon, where astronauts are around 16% body weight, on Mars they're around 33%, 32%, if I remember correctly. So they're reduced, so we don't know what impact that has on the acute physiological changes to exercise, etc. So our system allows us to assess that. We've already published some papers. We looked at LOP measurements in simulated micro and lunar gravity versus 1G and showed there was differences. So that gave us the rationale to say, well, we have to measure LOP in space. We can't just measure it pre-flight and then prescribe based on that. Um,
Exactly.
we've just finished a study looking at jumping plyometric exercise with BFR. So one of our ideas is, can we get astronauts to just simply jump on the moon at 16% body weight with BFR cuffs on? And can that provide a significant cardiovascular stimulus, but also providing a stimulus to muscle? And our early data, which I won't spoil for any of the listeners who may or may not be interested, our data suggests it can from this first study, and we're just writing that up now. So we've got lots of ground-based stuff planned as well, which is important because the in-flight stuff, I mean, SpaceX moved very quickly, which is great, but the in-flight stuff tends to take time, so it's good to have the ground-based stuff going as well.
Badass, man. How about beyond space? Come on back to Earth, Luke. I'm bringing you back to Earth. Let's talk about what you're
Yeah.
doing here.
Back to
So,
Wales. Back to
you wrote
Wales.
a you wrote a really good paper on what we should be looking for with BFR and bone with Chris Sentner, and so I know
Hmm.
you've got some interest in bone as well. So can you touch base on anything you're doing with that right now?
Yeah, for sure. As you know, that's another key area of interest of mine. Like the pain and the hyperalgesia work, I kind of get drawn to
Hmm.
the really novel niche stuff that we know nothing about.
Right.
Um, And the bone stuff, I think that the studies that have been published, the acute work and some of the early chronic studies are good, but they're quite flawed and limited with regards to how they've measured bone metabolism and bone turnover. But then you've
Hmm.
got the work coming out of Houston Methodist, the
Yeah,
the
Brad
ACL
stuff.
paper,
Yeah.
Brad's ACL paper. I love that because it took our ACL work to another level. It was great.
Right.
He found the same in terms of function strength, which is always a relief.
Yeah.
But the bone stuff is really interesting, and I know they have the Achilles stuff, which I'm assuming we can talk about because it was presented at
At
ACSM,
CSM.
wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
AOSSM. It should be almost done, I think.
Nice. So yes, and from what I understand, there's similar findings on mitigation, site-specific mitigation of bone mineral loss, and that I don't know, really captured my attention. And yeah, so Chris and I, go back a bit, and we were chatting about this randomly, and I was like, I had an idea for a review paper, so we wrote it, because everything about BFR exercise goes against how we know bone adapts to general exercise. And we don't actually know a great deal about bone itself, but we know that the best osteogenic stimulus is typically high intensity, high load exercise, big impact,
Hmm.
non-repetitive loading cycles. If you walk on a treadmill with BFR, it's low intensity and it doesn't get more repetitive than that.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it kind of goes against all that, and it got us thinking about how, what might be a key driver, and potentially it's that withdrawal of blood, creating hypoxic conditions within the bone. Also, some of the swelling from venous occlusion and what that might do to the osteocytes and how they sense stress, because
Interstitial
bone,
fluid flow. Yeah.
yeah, the interstitial fluid flow hypothesis. So we wrote that paper, and then within it, we discussed the mechanisms by which bone adapts to exercise based on what we know. And then we discussed the BFR based bone literature. And then we provided some insights on what mechanisms might be at play and how BFR might activate those. And then I think probably the most important part of the paper for me was that we developed this methodological framework where we
Hmm.
said, here's all the things that are really important for bone-based research that haven't been done. So, for example, nutrition, the whether you eat a food or not, so whether you're fasted or whether you've consumed food, and also the macronutrient breakdown of that food heavily influence the biomarker response. So, some biomarkers of bone resorption can increase significantly when you've had a pre-exercise meal, or you can see no change when you've not had it. Another factor is time of day. So that's another thing to control for menstrual cycle. So we outlined all the things and said, okay, if we're going to do this well, we need to measure all these things, control this stuff. And now we've moved on. And the first step is to run that study. So we've started recruiting to run a study here
Well,
in
I'll throw
Northumbria.
out too, like, I love you did it because if anyone, because people come to me all the time with study
Uh-huh.
ideas, and usually
Yeah.
they want money or or product as well.
Wait, we
But
can ask you
anyways,
for money. I didn't know that.
no,
Ah, okay.
go to Canada, talk to the Canadians. Yeah.
I'm going to write this down.
Yeah.
Johnny, direct debit. Good. Got it.
But if it's ever bone questions for a study, I always say read this paper first if you're designing a study. That's how Abe Dumar, after he read it, he's like, "Can I
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
talk to Luke?" So yeah, thank
We
you
had a great
because I
chat. That
anyone
was
that
good.
has bone ideas, they really should read Luke's paper if you're going to design a study for sure. So
See, we write the best stuff in the pub as well. So,
there you go, there you go.
yeah,
And
no,
so now
but
you're
this,
looking at it.
yeah. So we're looking at so we're running a crossover design study. So we're looking at healthy young male adults for the first step, just because it's easier to control for some of the key confounders at this stage or within the funding limits we have. But we've got five conditions. So there's it's all leg press exercise. So there's a low intensity leg press protocol, just typical BFR prescription protocol, 75 reps, etc. So low intensity by itself. Then we have the same, but with 40% LP BFR. Then we have the same with 80% LP. We have a high intensity exercise group at 80% 1RM. And then we also have a passive BFR condition and a non-exercising control condition as well. And the idea is that, yeah, there's a lot. So we're bringing them in fasted. We're feeding them a meal with specific macronutrients, with calcium supplementation, potassium, all things we know influence this acute response. Asking them to sit there for an hour and a half, look pretty, read a book, and then we take blood samples, and we're taking 8 or 9 samples over a 4-hour period, and we're going to basically look at the response of key biomarkers of bone formation, bone resorption, calcium metabolism, hormones, cytokines to look at mechanisms, VEGF, digging into hypoxia just to see, okay, what's happening to bone metabolism and bone turnover and what the underpinning mechanisms might be. So it pretty much links the blueprints in our paper, and it will be the first study to track all the key biomarkers at regular time intervals so we don't miss a peak of a biomarker. Because some biomarkers, for example, we know from the non-BFR literature, peak 10 minutes post-exercise. So if you
Mhm.
don't measure them until 25 minutes, you missed that change. So it's a very comprehensive study. So we've got that going on at the minute, which will be, fingers crossed, we see some nice changes. And we're also working
You're
on
already enrolling and
yeah,
collecting.
we're enrolling. Yeah, we're
Is this with
enrolling.
the
So
UK
we've
military with Ladlow in
No, this is within house, so within our lab at the university. So, but yeah, we're doing some nice stuff with the military over here as well, and another really cool area, which we're actually working on this week, in July, over in the UK, is started collaborating with an individual at Harvard Medical School, a biomedical engineer who developed a NIRS device, so a near infrared spectroscopy device to non-invasively measure bone blood perfusion. So typically we don't have anything that can measure blood flow in the bone accurately that isn't very invasive or very expensive and hard to access. So he developed this system a few years back and has been looking at bone blood flow and regulation in aging and people with spinal cord injury. And I'd reached out and said, "Hey, I like putting cuffs on people. So any chance you wanna the device looks really cool. I want to know what's happening to to blood in the bone when we put the cuff on and when we occlude it at different percentages of LP. And I want to know what's happening during exercise,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
if that reduction of blood and a hypoxic environment, and then the big reperfusion and the reactive hyperemia into the bone, if that's what's driving changes in the bone, then we should really have a way of quantifying that. And so that's another project that we're setting up the technique. And
I
yeah,
love where you're going because I've felt like with bone, as well as probably maybe with the vascular side, I think the pressure is going to be dialed in almost like a drug, like
yeah,
that's going to be a key component. And that would be so amazing if we can be like, I got a fracture or an osteopenic person, and I know I have to use this LOP pressure based on your fluid flow dynamics. That's,
yeah, and
we don't get that all the time in rehab. I mean, to be that dialed in.
yeah, but it's I think it's really important. I think especially when there's evidence out there that for different outcomes that higher pressures might be more effective or lead to great adaptations, whether it be muscle size or hypoalgesia, some of our work. But I really do think I really do think there's a strong mechanistic underpinning for some of these changes, and I think that in the bone as well, higher pressures. If you're thinking about the level of reactive hyperemia, the level of
Hmm.
hypoxia, it's going to be important, I think. So it's nice that we're going to be able to quantify that and look at what's happening within the bone, and it'll be the first time that this can ever be done in general in bone, but also specific to BFR. And then we can say, okay, now we want to look at what happens in bed rest, what happens in parabolic flight, but then also in patients. You get a fracture in the tibia. This site specific mitigation of bone renal that Lambert's documented twice now. Okay, well, is BFR improving blood supply to that area of the bone where the tunnels have been drilled for the ACL? Is that why? Is that what's happening? Are we improving rest in blood supply to the bone? We can measure that potentially pre-post intervention now with this device and this technique. So I think in terms of understanding the mechanisms by which BFR is beneficial to bone, and I don't know how you feel, but I feel like that will help with the skeptics. I've some people say, how's it have an impact on bone? It goes against uh, all the ways bone adapts and the stimulus that bone responds to. BFR is the opposite, and I was one of those people,
Yeah, yeah.
initially, and now with Lambert's work, which is great. I know you're supporting that, Johnny. It's nice to see those studies come out and support what we're trying to do from like a physiology perspective.
Yeah, I think it's the same skeptics in the early days of why there's no way low load exercise with this tourniquet can make the muscle change. We all know,
Mm,
our ACSM guidelines, and then when you start looking at the mechanisms behind it,
mm,
and it starts to make sense. And I think we've just always looked at bone as load based, and there's so much more to it than that, that we know. So Brad's work, he used 80% in both those studies, so it is a higher pressure.
mm.
So I think you might be there, but even we get these terrible
It's interesting.
fractures. Yeah, these terrible, terrible fractures that can be hard to even do exercise. So even if we can see like an IPC type thing,
Hmm.
at 100% is doing something for bone mineralization. I mean, it could be huge, all the way from just fracture healing in space to, I mean, we in the military had to amputate limbs just because of non-unions, because they were
Hmm.
just couldn't weight bear forever and the bone would just
Hmm.
never heal. And it's like, okay, we just got to cut this thing off. Well, if we can give them this sort of stimulus, because a lot of it was blood flow, it was just not
Hmm.
the good blood flow down there anymore. Because especially with like blast trauma or just any big trauma where you get, maybe like a big old type 3 open tibia, the
Hmm.
muscle's destroyed as well. It takes so much energy to break a tibia, um, that the muscle is just fibrotic and capillary beds are gone. Your stem cell pool is probably just destroyed. And so, if we can do something to improve blood flow just through a hypoxic event, you know, it's across the board going to be pretty badass.
Yeah, definitely. I think if you can avoid, the amputation, that's huge. It's life changing. It's life altering for those
Yeah,
people.
yeah,
And I think we've got a motto developing in our lab at the minute. It's like observe, understand, mechanism, optimize. Thinking about the mechanism for the bone stuff, I think that's really important that we understand how something's working to then go and then optimize it. So,
yeah,
we need to understand the impact of pressure on blood flow to the bone, and level of hypoxia. So if we think that's a driver where we have greater reduction in blood flow and then a greater reactive hyperemia to the bone, if we believe that's a key driver of adaptation, we need to know which pressure gives us the
Yeah.
biggest response there. So we have to
No, and I
observe and
think we're going to
understand
get there.
the
That's
mechanism.
what's going to be really
Yeah.
cool. Like the patient comes in and it's, oh, I've got a fracture. Okay, these are my pressure I use for fracture, or I'm just trying to, increase strength and hypertrophy. This is the range for that. Or I've got a vascular condition, and these are the pressures that we should use for improving vascularity. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm hoping we get to that point.
Yeah, definitely. I think aging as well is a big one. Like we know that as people age, unfortunately, we all age, right? It's we can offset it. We can do resistance-based training, but we all age, and that includes the bone. And we see increased fat cells, adipocytes within the bone as we age, and we see a reduction in blood supply to the bone as we age. And my theory is that we see a reduction in blood supply and dysregulation of blood flow to the bone in space, accelerated form of aging, which is where I'm trying to push that. But I think, if we're able to implement BFR as an intervention to mitigate, loss of bone mineral with aging, or potentially, people who have osteoporosis, postmenopausal women, and we use BFR, just to kind of offset some of those losses, reduce fracture risk, and I think it's also, I think it'll be really powerful as a rehab tool. We know that, and the bonus Lambert stuff that's coming out now is really cool to support that. I think also as a preventative tool as well, like linking to what you said about
Yeah.
those individuals who ended up with an amputation. Could that be avoided?
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
So, anything else that you're 9 million thing? The space stuff is just enough. I can't believe you've got more things going on. But any other projects BFR related? You're our man over there. That and also, are you any sports stuff anymore? Are you're too cool for the sports
Yeah.
side? You're just space guy now.
No, certainly not. No, we have some other stuff. Yeah, I can talk about some other stuff. We've got well, as you know, we're doing some work in the UK military here, so we have a couple of BFR programs of research ongoing. One of which is looking at how BFR could be used as a treatment for people with chronic pain. So they're individuals with a lower limb MSKI, but the key or critical point is that these individuals, their rehab is limited by pain. A lot of them have complex regional pain syndrome, which they've developed. So it's not limited by the bone or the muscle per se. It's the pain that comes with loading those tissues. So this came about building off my previous postdoc work, which is looking at hypoalgesia, and we were doing some MSK rehab stuff in the UK military, so just general, muscle growth, strength, etc., function. But now we've dipped into the pain population, and we've just wrapped up a pilot RCT where we were comparing different pressures, so 40% versus 80% LLP over a week-long high-frequency training program. And the idea is that we take what appears to be the most effective forward into a full-blown RCT, which will start in September, which will compare BFR to what is currently standard treatment for these individuals. We'll have a 3 week high frequency program. They have a 3 week, I guess, service where individuals come. They spend 3 weeks at this tertiary rehab center, so we can access them every day. So I was pushing for high frequency, high frequency. Let's go, let's blast them,
Yeah. Yeah.
see what we can get. So yeah, the pain stuff is yeah, it's really cool. I still enjoy that because we don't know anything about it. I think the things I enjoy most in the BFR world are the ones we know the least about
Yeah,
because
you got to
it's
keep running with the paint stuff. You beat everyone to the chase on publishing some mechanisms behind that. So
yeah,
we
and
were
do
all
you know
seeing it
it's
clinically, and now
yeah, but yeah, it's yeah, I think that's awesome. So another project I guess linked to that is starting some pilot work with patients with peripheral arterial disease. And I know we've got stuff published on that, and I think there's stuff going on in the US as well. If I recall you saying before, so working with someone locally here, a vascular surgeon who has patients who are like their pain and their intermittent claudication is so bad they're walking 10 meters and they're stopping because of pain. They're at the, as he describes it, the cliff edge, whereby the next option for them is amputation because it's so bad. So we're looking at, okay, can we do an IPC type protocol, applying, occlusion, reperfusion, twice a day, 2 weeks? Can that reduce pain and can it improve how long they can walk for on a treadmill as a marker of function? As like a, can we use IPC to like pull them back from that cliff edge, and then if we can we then start rehabilitating them with some of the aerobic based stuff as well? So
it's repeating the Beers hyperemia stuff from
yeah, yeah,
1920s. Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. No, that's a
yeah.
I mean, that's been just like a no-brainer of a study that needs to be out there. I mean,
Mm,
we have so much mechanism that it could help that vascularity, and those people are in dire straits. And yeah, there was a couple of years ago that I'm sure you saw the
mm,
exercise study they did in the peripheral
mm,
arterial disease people, and big pain improvements and ability to walk without their claudication symptoms. And they were doing BFR exercise, but still, I think
mm.
that's an easy population to go after.
Yeah, definitely. It's the populations who need it the most. And I look back fairly recently, I was updating our BFR risk assessment here at Northumbria. And I was looking back at some of the contraindications I previously listed and looking back at some of the old literature. And I was like, damn, we can take half of those off there now. We've been doing it in all these
What's funny,
patients.
that's
And
what I like. Our list was so long, and it's kind of like, we were able to like just kind of scratch them off because this study showed it
yeah,
was okay. This study showed it was okay. This study showed it
yeah,
was okay. And it's getting smaller and smaller by the day.
yeah, which is great. And I think, I think that part of me thinks that's due to the fact that it just doesn't provide a risk for those individuals, those populations, but also because we're still far off, but we are getting to more of a homogenous approach to applying BFR as well, which we know that helps with the efficacy and the safety side of things, or the personalization of the stimulus, just like we'd personalize a chemotherapy treatment or a exercise program, personalizing the BFR stimulus and making sure that yeah. So
So yeah,
yeah,
are
that's what
y'all
I'm.
making are you working with Delphi to get the Gen 3 ready for space?
Yeah, so we'll start a project. We're just waiting for the green light with the contracts to be signed, but we'll start a project to modify the Gen 3, which will be fairly straightforward because we overcame all the big hurdles. They weren't big hurdles at all, but we addressed everything, the key things in the previous project. So, and we'll do that with the Gen 3 and get that qualified for use in space. And then the idea is to go down the aerobic route, looking at
Let's
the
go,
acute
baby.
responses. Yeah, and just saying, okay, well, let's have a comprehensive physiological assessment. Let's look at the muscle. Let's look at bone if we can. Let's look at the cardiovascular system and metabolism and see what's happening. Yeah, I'm excited by that. I've got a good feeling about aerobic exercise with BFR in space.
Yeah, yeah, I think. Well,
We'll
we're gonna
see.
see. I'll be dead, but everyone on Mars just doing their rowing machines with their Gen 20 Delphi systems, just rowing away.
With the ORS shirt on, you'll still be there in spirit, don't worry.
There,
uh,
cool, man. I hope you're finding time. I know you're finding time to go to the pub.
yeah.
Finding time to still play soccer.
Yeah, not as much as I have been. I've actually taken up golf now. So
Jesus, you're an old
yeah, I
man
guess.
now. You and
Yeah,
Steven
no.
Patterson.
I'm not as old as Stephen Patterson, Jesus. But yeah, I don't like not being good at a sport, and I'm not good at golf.
That's why I
So
gave it up.
I'm in nice. Okay, you got any clubs? You got any? I've got some old hand-me-downs, which are they're
My,
not quite wooden, but they're
I think I threw mine all in the
rubbish.
water, out in the lake.
Nice. Okay, I'll come fish him out next time I'm over in Texas in the swamp.
Yeah, man.
But uh, but yeah, no. So yeah, I'm doing a bit of football, golf. Yeah, so things are
Well,
good.
let's put a plug in also for SHOP, the NASA conference. So it'll be going on, I'm sure, again next year in April. Corey and those guys at NASA do a great job, and I think a lot of people thought it wasn't open to the public. And so, if you're interested in Luke's work, I'm sure you'll be presenting there next year. We've been a founding sponsor since the year one of NASA's SHOP conference. So, if you guys like this BFR and space stuff, go to the NASA SHOP conference down in Houston at NASA next year. It's a really
Yeah,
cool thing. If you want to be around a bunch of really smart people who make you feel dumb, go to that conference. Or just bad, you're around astronauts. You're like, oh, you have a PhD, an MD, and you are an astronaut. I hate you. Yeah,
oh, there's a few of those guys there, but yeah,
yeah.
like this shop would be great next year. It's expanding in some respects, and I'm going to be supporting Corey on the organising committee for it as well, so a bit more
Oh
involved.
boy,
So it'll
careful what
be
you
be
wish
fun.
for. Yeah,
Yeah, he's a great guy, so I'm happy to
yeah.
help. Yeah, we'll see,
Awesome,
we'll see. But
awesome. Well, thanks, Luke. Taking enough of your time. We'll have to bring you on probably in about 6 months because there's going to be a million new things you're working on. But as always,
we'll
brother, it's great to
see.
talk with you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, enjoyed it. Thanks for having me
All right,
back.
man. All right. Thanks, bro. Thanks for tuning in to the Owens Recovery Science Podcast. Before we go, a quick reminder that the information discussed on this show is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Always consult with your healthcare provider before making any changes to your treatment or training regimen. For show notes and additional resources, be sure to check out owensrecoveryscience.com. And don't forget to like the show and subscribe for more evidence-based insights. Until next time, earn your deflate.